Smoke still hung in the air when the numbers were laid out, and the conclusion felt almost comforting in its certainty. In a headquarters deep inside East Prussia, the German High Command believed the impossible American advance was about to collapse under its own weight. Armies, after all, could outrun courage, but never fuel. August 19th, 1944. At Wehrmacht headquarters, General Alfred Jodl studied intelligence flowing in from France. What he saw looked catastrophic for the Americans. General George Patton's Third Army had surged roughly 250 miles in just 30 days. Armored spearheads were already racing toward Germany itself. But Jodl's staff had done the arithmetic, and mathematics, they believed, never lied. An advance like this could not last. Jodl calmly explained to his operations officers that the Americans had pushed beyond the limits of supply. No army in history had sustained such speed without collapsing under logistical strain. Tanks needed fuel. Trucks needed roads. Physics could not be argued with. One advancing armored division burned roughly 150,000 gallons of fuel every single day. Patton commanded 12 divisions, stretched across a front nearly 60 miles wide. Their supply depots still sat more than 250 miles behind them, back on the Normandy beaches. The calculations were precise. Third Army required 12,000 tons of supplies every day just to keep moving. The shattered French road network could not support that flow. Retreating German forces had blown bridges and torn up rail lines. The staff prediction was unanimous. Patton would grind to a halt at the Seine River. The pause would give German forces time to regroup, dig in, and perhaps hold the line through winter. The math was flawless. The conclusion seemed inevitable. What Jodl did not know was that, even as he spoke, American logistics officers were preparing something no European army had ever attempted. A supply system so aggressive, so relentless, that it shattered every assumption German doctrine was built upon. Within 6 days, it would be running at full speed. On August 25th, the Red Ball Express would begin, and within days, tanks that were supposed to be stranded would come crashing through German defenses at the Seine. Germany's best military minds were about to confront a reality they did not understand. Their confidence was rooted in bitter experience. German officers had pioneered Blitzkrieg and understood better than anyone how logistics strangled offensives. They had watched their own victories die when supply lines collapsed. In Russia, early advances had not been stopped by Soviet resistance, but by distance. Trucks broke down on primitive roads. Horse-drawn wagons, still making up roughly 80% of German transport, could not keep pace with armored units. Rail lines used incompatible gauges. Supplies piled up hundreds of miles from the front. Entire divisions sat immobile, engines silent, waiting for fuel that never came. The lesson had been written in frozen corpses. General Heinrich von Luttwitz, commanding the 47th Panzer Corps, believed the Americans now faced the same trap. Mechanical superiority would become a weakness. Machines demanded fuel, ammunition, spare parts. History, he insisted, showed what followed next. German intelligence tracked American consumption obsessively. A Sherman tank averaged barely half a mile per gallon on roads, even less across fields. An infantry division consumed roughly 700 tons of supplies daily. An armored division required closer to 1,000 tons. On August 20th, General Siegfried Westphal, Chief of Staff to Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, issued his assessment. The enemy's supply situation, he wrote, was mathematically impossible. The Germans waited for the halt. It never came. August 25th, 1944. In a requisitioned French chateau near Laval, Colonel Charles Thrasher faced a room of skeptical officers. Patton's army was burning through supplies faster than any force in history. Rail transport had collapsed. Scheduled convoys clogged depots. The entire system was breaking down. Thrasher's solution sounded reckless, almost insane. They would turn the roads of France into a one-way highway of war. Trucks would run 20 hours a day, no stopping except for fuel or emergencies. The initial target was 4,500 tons daily at minimum. Two parallel routes would be created. One lane carried loaded trucks forward. The other sent empties racing back. Operations would run 24 hours a day, headlights blazing. Blackout discipline would be abandoned completely. Convoys would roll at 5-minute intervals, averaging 35 miles per hour. Mobile maintenance units would be staged roughly every 30 miles. Military police would pull any truck moving under 25 miles per hour off the road. If a vehicle could not be fixed in 15 minutes, it would be pushed aside and abandoned. Lieutenant Colonel Gordon Eyes of the Motor Transport Service ran the numbers with Thrasher. They would need 140 truck companies, nearly 6,000 vehicles, 90% availability. By every logistics manual ever written, it was impossible. Within 36 hours, it was operational. The name came from rail terminology. A red ball freight was an express shipment that took priority over everything else. This convoy would do the same. On August 26th, drivers from the 39 16th Quartermaster Truck Company climbed into their GMCCKW trucks. Soldiers called them deuce and a halves. Their loads were ammunition, bound for Patton's guns, nearly 186 miles east. Of the 23,000 drivers who would eventually operate the Red Ball Express, roughly 75% were African American soldiers. They served in a segregated army. An America that would not let them eat in white restaurants or use white facilities still depended on them to keep its most celebrated general moving. The irony was impossible to miss. Every gear they shifted was a quiet argument for their own citizenship. A culture formed almost overnight. Slogans were painted on truck doors. Patton's Blood Bank. Hitler, here we come. Detroit to Berlin Express. The trucks became homes, identities, and pride. Rules changed. Slow vehicles pulled aside without debate. Breakdowns were shoved into ditches. Any truck moving under 20 miles per hour was treated as an obstacle to be eliminated. Drivers worked in pairs. 20 hours behind the wheel, 4 hours of sleep, coffee by the gallon. Military issued stimulants to stay awake. They drove through exhaustion that would have hospitalized most men. Within 48 hours, the rhythm locked in. It would not stop for 82 days. By August 28th, German reconnaissance units overlooking the main route began filing reports that seemed absurd. An unbroken column of vehicles. Headlights visible for more than 12 miles. No spacing, no concealment. Officers from the 116th radioed estimates of nearly 1,000 vehicles per hour. To German doctrine, this was madness. From a dark foxhole, the distant vibration was more than noise. It was the sound of an industrial machine that did not sleep and did not care if anyone else did. On August 30th, General Edgar Feutinger, commanding the 21st Panzer Division, observed the convoys himself. His report to Army Group B carried unmistakable alarm. Vehicles passed every 30 seconds, day and night, no pauses, no hiding, no rules he recognized. What German officers could not grasp was that American logistics followed a different philosophy. Where Germans prized concealment, Americans relied on volume. Where Germans preserved vehicles, Americans assumed failure and planned for it. Where German doctrine demanded authorization at every step, American drivers made decisions on the fly that would have required field marshal approval in the Wehrmacht. The difference was cultural, and it was decisive. In the first week alone, from August 25th to August 31st, the Red Ball Express delivered nearly 89,940 tons of supplies. Each round trip covered roughly 686 miles. The original target had been 4,500 tons per day. The drivers were delivering nearly triple that. Third Army never slowed for lack of fuel. By September 5th, total deliveries reached 135,000 tons. Vehicle availability averaged 92%. German intelligence officers stared at the reports in disbelief. At this rate, American forces could sustain offensive operations indefinitely. The predicted collapse had not merely failed to occur, it had been reversed. Patton was not stopping. He was accelerating. Third Army crossed the Seine on August 25th, exactly when German calculations said it would run dry. They liberated Rons on August 30th. Bridgeheads were seized at Verdun the next day. German military science had declared this physically impossible, and yet it was happening. Behind it all stood a man the Germans had underestimated. General George C. Marshall, Army Chief of Staff, was among the greatest logistical minds the United States ever produced. He had been thinking about this problem since 1918. In the First World War, then Colonel Marshall had orchestrated the movement of more than 600,000 men and 93,000 horses for the Meuse-Argonne offensive, coordinating the transfer in just 14 days, largely at night, under German noses. Those lessons became doctrine: continuous flow, redundancy, accepting waste to maintain speed. Marshall trained the officers who would execute it. He reshaped the army between 1939 and 1941, forcing outdated generals into retirement and promoting leaders he personally evaluated. Every major American commander in Europe, Patton included, was his student. The Red Ball Express was Marshall's vision made real. Its chief architect in the field was General John C. H. Lee, quartermaster chief for the European theater. Soldiers called him Jesus Christ himself, Lee not kindly. He was abrasive, arrogant, and deeply unpopular. After Paris was liberated, he moved his headquarters into the Hotel Majestic, while combat troops slept in foxholes. But Lee understood a truth others ignored. Wars were won by tonnage delivered, not battles fought. When Patton demanded fuel, Lee found it. When ammunition ran low, Lee prioritized it. He cared about tons per mile per day, not approval. Fuel dumps were staged roughly 50 miles ahead of the front. Ammunition appeared at crossroads days before Patton arrived. Maintenance units swapped engines in under an hour. If a truck failed and could not be repaired in 15 minutes, it was stripped and shoved aside. Sentiment had no place in the math. Winter brought freezing rain and snow. Engines refused to start. Drivers drained warm oil, heated it over fires, and poured it back in. Batteries were wrapped in blankets. Alcohol was mixed into fuel to prevent freezing. Tires failed constantly. Over 180,000 were worn out in 82 days. Yet the trucks kept moving. German soldiers learned to fear the night. That was when the sound carried farthest. A constant rumble, audible more than 6 miles away. Veterans later described it as a mechanical heartbeat. Endless fuel, endless ammunition, endless pressure. Attempts to interdict the routes failed. Artillery destroyed individual trucks, but thousands followed. Luftwaffe pilots who tried to strafe the convoys ran into Allied fighters patrolling overhead. Few returned. By mid-September, Third Army stood at the German border, roughly 250 miles from Normandy in just 6 weeks. It was the fastest advance of any army in Europe. Only strategic decisions, including the diversion of fuel to Operation Market Garden, finally slowed Patton, not logistical failure. The Red Ball Express officially ended on November 16, 1944. In 82 days, it delivered over 412,000 tons of cargo and covered more than 122 million ton miles. It had cost more than $100 million and worn out thousands of trucks. By traditional standards, it was wildly inefficient. By strategic standards, it changed warfare forever. Field Marshal Walter Model later told his staff they were not fighting an army, but American industrial capacity. Others agreed. Not tanks, not planes, trucks. The Germans had calculated everything except the scale of American mobilization. The Red Ball Express proved that in modern war, logistics is not support. It is the weapon. And once unleashed, it does not stop.